It's live. Okay, so it's Who Makes the News. Alicia, what is Who Makes the News?
Well, Who Makes the News is the live portion of my show called Morning Waves, where I look through the national print media, the Fiji Times and the Fiji Sun, every morning to see what are the stories making the headlines and if those headlines feature women or not.
All right, so we're going to be talking about the newspapers, Fiji Times and Sun of the 6th and the 7th. So tell me, I guess we'll start with sports. How's it looking?
I guess it's okay if you're looking for, women making the pages. We have done that in the sport because obviously there's the South Pacific Games happening right now. And women have done, well, I guess you can say they've done fairly well in like the medals tally, because yesterday I believe it was a woman who made the first medal for Fiji, who won the first medal in the lifting category. But if you kind of look at it at a slightly deeper level and you look at the comparison to the male weightlifters on the, I think it was the Fiji Sun or the Fiji Times, I can't really remember, but the article was much smaller for her kind of efforts compared to the male weightlifters. So I was just kind of wondering, what does that really kind of say about the kind of value that we put in the efforts and the recognition towards women's efforts in weightlifting sports?
Yeah. I know that I think you were telling me before we started the swimming coverage was a bit better maybe than the weightlifting.
Yeah, that was in today's papers. In the Fiji Times, I believe, at the back page of the Fiji Times, they have a picture of the women's 100 meters freestyle swimmers. Caroline Puamau of Fiji with her bronze medal and Matalita Buondromo with her silver. And they are sort of, well, the only person who is quoted, I believe, is Buondromo right at the end of the article. So nothing from Caroline for her bronze medal. And then on the inner back page of the Fiji Times, there's kind of the majority of the articles do feature female athletes. So they're speaking about Cheyenne Rover, who unfortunately missed out on her medals, I believe, in swimming once again.
Right.
No quote from her or any of the female athletes. However, they do quote the coach Sharon Smith in the actual article. And there's another article featuring the Fijiana reps, Rusila Tamoy and Elina Taomba Ratauluva. So they are directly quoted, as well as the coach. And then in like other kind of sports events, there's something about paddlers. Only the men's team is mentioned. Table tennis, it just says the women's table tennis was a bit unlucky, losing to Vanuatu. The women's soccer had a disastrous start to their campaign. And that's pretty much it from the other kind of categories that women have played in the South Pacific Games for sports.
They said it was disastrous. A disastrous
start, yeah, to their campaign.
Did they say that they finished well, or?
No, that was literally it. The women's soccer had a disastrous start to their campaign, going down 5-1 to host Papua New Guinea. That was it.
Oh well. Well, I guess we can't all be sponsored by mining companies. But I guess we only have 15 minutes break here in Labasa, so that and you always like having shorter shows. That's always better. But I guess we can move on. What are the other issues, I guess, coming through the papers in the past 2 days?
In the past 2 days, well, yesterday there were two press release statements from the Ministry for Women, one covering a new senior citizens park which will be opening in Lami, and another one on being gender responsive to domestic violence issues. Now, there were just release statements, but even so, I was still a little bit frustrated with the actual content of the press statements, because the one with the senior citizens park, it was kind of saying that, this is a very high priority for the senior citizens in the Lami area. And I was thinking, is it really? I mean, do they want a park for their needs? What about financial assistance, or what about access to healthcare? What about access to water and the other needs for the elderly? Why do you need a park? I just didn't really understand the priority that
Right.
was coming through the statement. And then the other statement on gender violence and domestic violence didn't really highlight what the root cause of domestic violence was. It was just saying that we need to be more responsive to domestic violence. And we have this MOU signed with the police force. But yeah, it was just no kind of analysis of the actual kind of situation that we have in the country.
Right. It's really interesting. I mean, between the Nandi Divisional Consultation, and we just had some of the issues being presented this morning here in Labasa, and if the older women were presented with a pack, I really don't think they'd be as grateful as all the mainstream media usually reports whenever people get something. They just raise the fact that the current Social Security support that they get is $50 a month, and that's particularly for those who have never really entered formal employment, and that is a pittance to live on, basically. They're also really concerned about a whole lot of things. I mean, from roads, and even the high level of violence was something that was raised, between domestic violence, but even some of the other issues that are tied to that. And then they're just talking about family support being a sort of contributing factor, but also a way to solve the issue. So it's interesting to see whether this will get picked up at all. We hope it will get picked up, because it's really important not only to talk about the importance of having family support so that if you face an issue, you can kind of nip it in the bud, rather than having something develop to a point where you're really just treating the symptoms. So what else has made the news in the past 2 days?
Well, funny that you should mention domestic violence and support from the community, because there has been statistics released by the Office of the Director of Public Persecutions.
Francis says hello.
Good morning, Francis.
Making the show. Doing Who Makes the News. Thank you. I now have a printout. Yep.
What's that? So it's been reported in both the Fiji Sun and the Fiji Times on these latest 47 cases of sexual offences being actually officially recorded. And the coordinator of the Fiji Women's Crisis Centre, Shamima Ali, is saying that while this is encouraging, it's still showing there is still about, I think she said 90% of the cases are still not reported to the police. And she also said it's very important for communities to get involved in prevention works and provide support to victims of rape in all possible ways. And it's also interesting as well, because in the actual article, Farisha Ahmed, the journalist, writes, 2 sexual offences involve couples in a domestic relationship. And that just got me thinking about the question, do people realize that even though you are married, if you don't want to have sex with your partner, you are perfectly entitled to say no, and your partner must respect that. Just because you have a ring on your finger, or if you're in a committed relationship with someone else, does not give your partner the authority to take control of your body in a sexual and demeaning way. So that's interesting, just to see that statistic with just 2 sexual offences involved in domestic relationships.
Yeah, I think marital rape was only recently, and I mean recently in the terms of maybe a decade or less, actually determined through the whole legislative process that it was illegal. But again, it goes back to talking about bodily autonomy and saying you don't actually owe your boyfriend, your partner, your husband, or even the other way around. In some cases, even the other way around. Any part of your body for any reason, and that's definitely a huge issue, because it contributes to unplanned pregnancy, even if the idea of it being unplanned never gets brought up. We were talking about how is somebody ready to be a parent and actually start a family last week, and so that in and of itself is still hardly ever addressed in a lot of relationships.
So that was an interesting one. And in terms of other women making the news from like kind of the local level, there's been a lot of articles lately in the papers from the advisory councillors around the country in terms of this national development and local development as well. I mean, I've always been wondering, where do women come into this kind of into play? And so there's an article on page 12 of the Fiji Times where they are speaking to one of the Draketi advisory councillors, Queenie Doreen, and she's basically highlighting the fact that local farmers in Draketi are complaining that when they go to the agricultural extension offices, the officers aren't there, basically. So she's kind of highlighting this issue for local farmers. So that's really interesting. I like to see that, you know, women are also involved in the kind of development and keeping other people accountable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting. I think advisory counselors are an appointed position, so it's a relatively difficult space to kind of get into. Although don't quote me on that. But also, we had a number of issues being talked about this morning from bus companies not actually going to communities if there's rain, a whole bunch of other things. And it's really interesting to see that in the north, people are trying to take their issues to the responsible people, the stakeholders, that kind of stuff, but getting no feedback and getting no response, even after trying to raise the issue for up to 5 years in some cases, particularly in terms of water access. And so it's really interesting to see that there's so many people trying to make this difference, but that accountability wasn't really there. And to some extent, particularly at the local government level, because there necessarily haven't been elections or there isn't a democratic process, it's really hard to tell people you need to be accountable in these spaces. So yeah. Has anything else made the news in the past 2 days?
Yeah, something a bit to where you guys are north. I believe Botha Bridge at Bulileka. It's made the papers yesterday and today, saying that the community are really, well, it's interesting because in the Fiji Times, they only quote, I believe, in the Fiji Sun, they just quote the Bulileka village headman. And they also quote a farmer from Waimbulu settlement. Whereas in the Fiji Sun, they quote the traditional chief for the area, who is a female, and her name is Andi Sivo, I believe. So it's interesting to see the different sources kind of making the stories. But it kind of just sort of sounds like just because have this translation issues and problems will be solved. Whereas we know from like our local kind of community network members that they have a plethora of, you know, road and transportation issues which still have been ongoing for a while. So it was interesting.
Yeah. So are there any other things before we wrap up today?
And well, in terms of, again, going back to rape, it's interesting the way that this journalist has sort of decided to spin it. It's titled "Man to Appear for Alleged Rape," and apparently a 26-year-old man has been charged with allegedly raping a 24-year-old girl who is the cousin of the accused. They were having a few drinks early in the morning. It's been labeled as a drinking spree. So I guess it's kind of insinuating that because alcohol was involved, they lost all sense of reason and not really kind of underlying other issues that may have attributed to it. Like we have raised before. Yeah.
Alcohol is the devil, apparently. It's exactly what causes rape. So we can't blame the people, even though they're supposed to be responsible for their actions. It's fine, right?
I don't really understand that one.
Anyway. Yeah. Well, thanks so much for having me on the show today, Alisia.
Well, thank you for connecting us across the Great Divide from the north to the south.
That is the waters, because we have to take the plane to get here. And yes, so if people have any questions or comments, how can they get in touch with the show or the radio?
Good question. We have several different ways you can contact us. You can call us on 3318160 for our direct landline to our community media center in Suva, or you can send an email to info@FemLINKPACIFIC.fj. And you can also like us on Facebook. Go to facebook.com/FemLINKPACIFIC. Like our page and then leave us your comment that way. And you can also follow us on Twitter. We use the name @FemLINKPACIFIC. So get in contact with us. any way you please.
Alrighty, so yeah, thanks to anybody who's listening or watching, and I'll see you tomorrow, Alicia.
Have a great rest of the workshop, Sian.
Yeah,
Bye.
bye.